The public is trained to look to the sky, conditioned to fear the missile launch. This is a calculated distraction. The kinetic cost of a peer-on-peer first strike is strategically prohibitive. The real vector of attack isn't a hypersonic streak across the atmosphere. The real vector is silence. Analysts at RUSI confirm the global economy's central nervous system is not in hardened bunkers, but in the crushing dark of the deep ocean. Over 97% of all global data, the lifeblood of liquidity and logistics, flows through a few hundred undersea cables. Geopolitical cyber attacks on this critical national infrastructure are no longer theoretical. They are an active theater of operations, as noted by security analysts. Simultaneously, the attack vector targets the nation's eyes, not with explosives, but with light and data packets. Low-cost, ground-based lasers can blind imaging satellites. Cyber intrusions can sever command and control links. The objective isn't destruction, it's sensory deprivation on a national scale. This sequence creates the blind Leviathan, a nation-state hollowed out by central bank policy failures that fracture society is suddenly paralyzed. Its vast conventional forces, fleets, armies, air wings, are rendered inert. A body with muscle but no nerves. A superpower with 1 million soldiers, but its screens are blank and its phones are dead. It cannot see the attacker. It cannot communicate a symmetric response. The motive for this new blueprint is not ideology. It is a solvency crisis. The cycle begins when central bank policies designed to manage economies instead accelerate domestic fractures. According to high-level analysis, their failure to control inflation and fiscal imbalances is a direct accelerant for populism and social decay. This transforms a nation's population from a strategic asset into a domestic liability. CSIS analysis of Russia's mobilization challenges highlights this mechanism. An unpopular war, prosecuted by a state facing internal economic pressure, has a prohibitive kinetic cost. Every tank, every soldier, every bullet deepens the domestic insolvency and risks systemic collapse. The state is, in financial terms, bankrupt. Weakness forces a pivot. A state that cannot afford a symmetric kinetic conflict is mathematically forced to find a cheaper vector. It must leverage asymmetry. This is where critical national infrastructure, or CNI, becomes the primary target. The goal is no longer to defeat an army on the field, but to trigger a cascading failure within the adversary's own system at a fraction of the cost. This pivot is not a choice. It is a function of economic reality. A state fighting for its own solvency cannot engage in expensive wars of attrition. It must pursue strategies that deliver a disproportionate return on investment. Attacking an enemy's infrastructure is the most efficient method to impose crippling costs, creating a strategic advantage out of domestic desperation. The entire economic model of conventional warfare has been rendered insolvent. The math is irrefutable. A Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, report codifies the new battlefield calculus. A $5 million main battle tank can be systematically disabled by a $500 FPV drone. This is a 10,000 to 1 cost-to-kill ratio inversion. The tank is no longer an asset. It is a $5 million liability. This inversion of kinetic cost is a strategic accelerant known as the democratization of violence. The state's monopoly on high-impact force projection, once guaranteed by billion-dollar defense budgets and industrial manufacturing, has been liquidated. Sophisticated lethality is now a consumer-grade commodity, accessible to non-state actors, splinter groups, or even individuals radicalized by the domestic solvency crisis. This is the critical vector. When a population is transformed into a liability by policy failure, the adversary's recruitment cost approaches zero. They don't need to field an army, they simply arm the disillusioned. The target is not the military. It is the nation's unprotected critical infrastructure. The low kinetic cost makes a distributed, systemic attack on the grid and logistics not just possible, but mathematically inevitable. The attack blueprint is never tested on the primary target first. That would be strategically inefficient. Instead, the protocols for systemic collapse are refined in what intelligence agencies refer to as proxy laboratories or gray zones. These are nations deliberately destabilized to serve as live-fire testing environments. The selection criteria for a gray zone is precise. The target nation must first exhibit pre-existing social fractures, a condition directly accelerated by central bank policy failures. As financial analysts like Alex Brummer have noted, mismanaged inflation and interest rate policies are a primary accelerant for populism and internal division. This creates the perfect petri dish. Within these pre-weakened states, the core tactic is tested: the asymmetric attack on critical national infrastructure, or CNI. According to cybersecurity authorities, state-sponsored actors are actively mapping CNI vulnerabilities for future geopolitical leverage. The gray zone is where they measure the real-world kinetic cost versus the systemic impact of shutting down a power grid, a water supply, or a port. The objective is to find the precise threshold where infrastructure failure transforms a population into an unsolvable domestic liability. Reports from War on the Rocks analyze the massive manpower required for internal stability operations, such as Indonesia's 1 million soldiers concept. The math is brutal. No Western nation possesses the conventional force-to-population ratio to control its own citizens during a full-spectrum CNI failure. Therefore, do not mistake regional instability as a random event. The crises reported in these proxy zones are not the cause. They are symptoms of a staging process. They are data points being collected. The asymmetric protocols perfected there are designed for export to a major power, engineering a solvency crisis so total that the state's only remaining lever is launch-on warning. The launch-on warning doctrine is not a choice. It is a mathematical protocol born from the physics of time and distance. The flight time of an intercontinental ballistic missile is approximately 30 minutes. Once an enemy launch is detected, a nation-state has minutes, not hours, to decide its own fate. Waiting for kinetic impact to confirm the attack guarantees the destruction of your command structure and retaliatory arsenal. Therefore, the system is engineered to launch a full-scale response based only on the warning of an inbound strike. This protocol, however, contains a fatal dependency: data integrity. As security analysts at CSIS have modeled, the new asymmetric vector is the geopolitical cyber attack. Instead of a kinetic first strike, an adversary can achieve the same outcome by attacking the critical national infrastructure that underpins nuclear command and control, specifically the early warning radar and satellite data feeds. This initiates the fog of digital war. For the commander in the bunker, the radar screen does not show an incoming missile. It goes black. Or worse, it shows 500. The system is blinded. Is it a hardware failure, a solar flare, or is it the prelude to a decapitation strike designed to paralyze the response? The protocol has no subroutine for ambiguity. In this state of engineered blindness, the commander is mathematically forced into a launch sequence out of fear. The doctrine's logic is irrefutable. Assuming the signal loss is a hostile act is the only way to guarantee state survival if the attack is real. Hesitation is not an option. The fear of being rendered defenseless becomes the trigger. The enemy did not have to fire a single missile. They only had to leverage the defender's own protocol against itself. The first phase of the blueprint is complete. Central bank policy failures have engineered widespread domestic insolvency, creating the social fractures necessary for systemic coercion. As noted by financial analysts, this fight against populism has backfired, transforming the populace into a national liability. This internal weakness makes critical national infrastructure the prime vector for a low-cost, high-impact asymmetric attack. Cybersecurity authorities have confirmed CNI is the primary target in the current geopolitical threat environment. It is no longer a question of if, but of which node is most efficient to disable. A direct military strike is obsolete. The kinetic cost is too high and attribution is certain. The new protocol is economic paralysis with plausible deniability. CSS models indicate the highest leverage target is not a carrier group, but a logistics hub. The calibration forecast. Within 12 months, expect a coordinated, attribution-impossible systems failure at the port of Singapore. Not an explosion, but a data blackout targeting container crane automation and terminal operating systems. The disruption will last 72 to 96 hours and be publicly attributed to a faulty software patch or a sophisticated ransomware attack. Its true purpose is to field test the West's supply chain fragility and political response decay in real time. It is the calibration shot before the kinetic event.